All the questions for tonight that we're going to have for both KrisAnne and Dr. Frank, we're asking you please put it in the Q&A tab. If for some reason you cannot find the Q&A tab, feel free to post it in the chat, and we will make sure that as long as we have time, we will get them to our speakers. And I do want to just give you guys just a little bit of information about Cause of America, the Cause of America team. What our goal really is to meet grassroots where they're at. We help support them in whatever they are trying to do with election integrity, which right now is the most pressing issue our nation has. And so we are very passionate about that. We know that the 5 Strong team is as well. I also would like to tell people, please make sure that you put some prayers in this week for Mike Lindell. He has been, behind Cause of America from the beginning. A lot of people on this call obviously have been supported by him. He's got a pretty big trial coming up next week. You can go to the Lindell Defense Fund, and if you want to support him, givesendgo.com/Lindell. Thank you, Dr. Frank. If you can't monetarily support him, no problem. Just please give him some prayers. There's some big things coming, and so we just want to make sure that we support him as much as possible. And so that is my portion. I'm going to hand this on over to David Kane. He has been very active in election integrity and a huge supporter in Alabama, the state calls. And I know the Alabama core team is very grateful for him as well. He's also been seeking truth and transparency just like everybody else. So I'm going to hand this call on over to him. David, take it away.
Thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate that. Welcome, everyone. It has just been a beautiful day here in the state of Alabama. And what a wonderful evening for a Teams call, huh? Yeah, right? I am truly excited about tonight. I don't give lip service to things, and I cannot wait for the content we're about to hear. Before we get started, though, I want to hand it off to Kimberly real quickly. She has an exciting announcement for us. Kimberly, take it.
Thank you so much. We do have some exciting news to share, so get ready to mark your calendars. We are thrilled to announce that Dr. Frank will not only be here tonight, but he will actually be joining us in person this summer for a very special event. This is an incredible opportunity you don't want to miss. So save the dates, July 24th through 26th. Dr. Frank will not only be presenting, but he'll also lead hands-on workshops, giving you the chance to learn directly from the best in the field. To make it as convenient as possible for everyone across Alabama, we're planning 2 locations, Madison for our North Alabama community, and a second centrally located venue around Montgomery. More details, including exact venues and registration information, will be announced soon. So if you haven't already, make sure you're on our mailing list to receive all the latest updates as plans come together. This is a rare chance to connect, learn, and be inspired alongside colleagues from across the state. Trust me, you don't want to miss this event. Stay tuned and get ready for an unforgettable experience.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. I appreciate that. I'm going to give a quick intro. We have 2 speakers with us tonight, and we are very just honored, really, to have people of this quality to really help inspire, motivate, and educate us. KrisAnne Hall. If you have not heard KrisAnne Hall, I'm going to tell you something. It moves you, both actually, Dr. Frank and KrisAnne move you to action. They give you an education and give you a foundation from which to pursue your own liberties. KrisAnne is a BS in biochemistry from Blackburn College. She received her JD from the University of Florida. She was a U.S. Army military intelligence cryptologic linguist and a prosecutor for the state of Florida for several years. She worked for a First Amendment law firm representing citizens fighting against unlawful arrest and prosecution. She's written multiple books on the U.S. Constitution and American history. She's a regular consultant on TV and in the podcast sphere. But if I wanted to leave you with one thing about KrisAnne before she speaks in a minute, she really puts the hay down where the cows can eat it, if I may use that aphorism. She speaks to the federal government's incredible, illegal, assumed overreaching, which has been allowed by us to have authority in our lives. We've been brainwashed. And she also speaks to the constitutionality of our elected sheriffs in ways that really bring it home. So I encourage you to be glued to the edge of your seat when KrisAnne takes over. Dr. Frank I hope a lot of you have heard him already, and I hope some of you are new to him, because getting exposed to this guy, I mean, you know, sometimes when you interest someone, the bullet point CV just doesn't do it justice. You know, it doesn't really capture the essence of the person. And Dr. Frank said that he's not afraid of pushing people out of their comfort zones into action. He's really, you know, off the beaten path, and he gives you, again, a blueprint, a detailed blueprint for how to get things done. So I'm going to skip his CV. A lot of you heard that previously. Dr. Frank, I'm going to turn it over to you. You have such an incredible personality. I trust you to take it from here, brother.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. I didn't know I was going to be on with KrisAnne until you guys invited her, but I was so delighted that you did, because KrisAnne is formative to the work I do, foundational. And it started, I was with her at an event in Florida, a Defend Florida event, and it started, you talk about speaking something uncomfortable. So I was standing in a group and 3 or 4 people were talking about an Article 5 convention of states. And I had helped out in the state of Ohio, to, you know, and I love grassroots movements, so I was doing that. And she was listening in, and she looked at me and she says, Dr. Frank, you just told us all that there isn't one good legislature in this country in your talk. How can you support Article 5 convention? You're going to put our Constitution in the hands of those people? And she just, boom. And it's like, I'm standing there like somebody punched me in the gut. I mean, I have no air to speak, because she was precisely correct. And that was my first direct encounter with KrisAnne. And then that sort of woke me up. And I'm like, okay, this lady's the real deal. I better pay attention. And so I read her book, Sovereign Duty, and it changes the way I think about my role in our government, because we're the government and it's my job to be the government. It's our sovereign duty because we're the sovereigns. Then she showed this crazy movie at that same event called Non-Compliant. And this is what you were just talking about, David. You said she brings the grass down. How did you put that? The grass down where the cows can eat it? This movie, she's basically telling you, listeners out there, to get off your can and stop complying. And she's basically empowering you to understand what the Constitution is really telling you. I love it. So that was a very formative to me. And then she came along with this one, and it completely changed my work on the road. This second movie, the Sheriff, because it's the same series. This one's called Non-Compliant. I bought these from you at that Oregon event, and KrisAnne, I think people can go on, and I've got a commercial. Here it is. It's right here. Yeah, go to this. Go to this website and buy these. I think I paid like $20 for this, so I can play it anywhere I want in the country now. And I have been all over the country, and I've been playing little snippets out of it. Because what's really happened, I'm an election guy, what's really been happening in our elections is we, the people, have given up our responsibility. We've given up our sovereign duty to run our own elections, and we've been letting other people do it. And so all I'm saying is this lady, she formed a lot of the foundation, or she taught me. How about if I say that? She taught me a lot of the foundation that I use in my day-to-day work around the country. After she kind of tweaked me that first time in Florida, I started looking into a little bit, and I came across this very interesting quote by Jefferson. Jefferson says, if a law is unjust, a man is not only a right to disobey it, he's obligated to do so. Okay, that is what this is about. So in other words, when they tell you, well, you have to do this, because of this policy or that policy, if it's unconstitutional, not only do you have a right to not obey, you're obligated to not obey. And that's what this is about. And then of course that led to the doctrine of the lesser magistrates and all this. So all this comes together in a very powerful foundational way. So as I'm traveling the country and teaching these election people how to take back local control of their elections, I'm on firm ground, and I'm never asking anybody to break any laws. And I'm saying to them, if your election is violating your constitutional rights, not only do you have to not comply with the laws, you're obligated to not comply with the laws, and you're obligated to interpose and defend your fellow citizens on that. And so that's that foundation that I have in my work. I credit to KrisAnne. And just let me give her one more ad, because she has this cool movie. It's called Genealogy of the Constitution. I made it. There it is. If you want to get an introduction to this lady, watch this movie. It's a cool movie. I think it was an experiment for her, but sometimes those are the best videos, where she basically traces the history of the Constitution, and she blew my mind. Because I grew up kind of with a romantic idea about our founding fathers and how, I like reading the Constitution of founding fathers, how brilliant they were and how they sat down and crafted this amazing document. Well, I'm not disagreeing. They did craft an amazing document, but they didn't write it. They edited it. They compiled it from former documents and organized it into a brilliant strategy. In other words, they used the collected wisdom of probably a millennium to put that together. And so these were learned men who knew the history, and they brought together the lessons of history to give us our country. So anyway, I can't say enough positive things about KrisAnne. The other thing I've noticed that she does, I guess one more thing, sorry, I said I was going to tell one, but I told you another one, is she's been going around the country working with Sheriff Mack, teaching sheriffs how to be sheriffs, because not just the average citizen. I mean, I'm an average citizen. I didn't know all this stuff. I was asleep most of my life. I'm 64, in the lab somewhere doing my physics and chemistry. By the way, I heard you were in chemistry, KrisAnne. That makes me admire you even more. Okay, so not only do we citizens not know our responsibilities and our duties, but our sheriffs don't even understand their powers. And so she's been going around the country teaching them. So I just can't rave enough about you there, KrisAnne. So do you want to say some introductory remarks, KrisAnne, or would you like me to ask you questions? What would you like to do going forward here? I think I've given a pretty good introduction.
Yeah. I think you've done a good job. I think we're good to go if you want to just get started.
Well, the title of this presentation was Are Alabama Elections Constitutional? And I don't know anybody I trust more than you to talk about the Constitution. So I went and I looked up in the Constitution, and I'd be interested in your comment about this. It says right here, Article 4, Section 4. Does this sound familiar? Is this where you would have gone? So am I learning? The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government. That doesn't mean Republican versus Democrat for those of you out there. We are entitled to a Republican form of government because we the people want one, but our government owes it to us. Have I said that right? And you want to take it from there?
Well, it's not that they owe it to us. The Constitution is a contract.
Oh, man, you fixed me already. You're totally right. Keep going. I'm going to shut up.
The Constitution is a contract. The U.S. Constitution is a contract between the states that creates the federal government. And in this context, when it says the United States, what it's saying is the federal government is created for the purpose to guarantee to every state a Republican form of government. And in context, you see, you can't take text out of context and understand the meaning. So in this, that's not the period at the end of the sentence. That's a comma with supporting clause, in which it says, and shall protect each of them against invasion. And so the role of the United States to guarantee every state a Republican form of government is to protect them
from invasion and conquering and overthrowing of their government. Now, there is a semicolon there which brings to us the conditions upon which the federal government, the United States, shall act to ensure this Republican form of government. And that's only when the state legislatures apply to the federal government to help protect them against invasion. Or the governor can make the same request, and when it says upon application, a written request to the federal government to help against invasion and against domestic violence, meaning insurrection or some kind of violence within that is attempting to change the Republican form of government. So every act of the federal government here is now focused on the duty to secure, protect, and guarantee to every state a Republican form of government. I hope that makes sense.
You did great, and I love this is, everybody can see why I like you so much. Now, let me throw a wrench in this right now. So I'm telling you right now, there isn't one state in this country where the elections are secure and where people are truly being represented. I've been all over the country, and it's a disaster. So we have Trump passing executive orders, and he's saying, we're going to make federal elections a legal holiday. And we might, and what if President Trump today said, we're going to have photo ID required on election day? How does that play? I mean, that doesn't seem to agree with this constitutional article here.
Well, so this is not the same as this article doesn't apply to elections. Okay, so that's not what this article is referring to. Elections are a state regulated issue. Our founders went through lots of debate and lots of discussion on elections, and they intentionally left elections to the states, mostly because they didn't want to have a large central power. And they knew that if the federal government was in charge of elections nationwide, even at the state and local level, that we would be transmuted into a kind of, well, Madison called it a mixed monarchy. So all our power would be transferred to Washington, D.C., because the elections could be controlled by the federal government. And then the people who are to be the power in government would lose all control of elections. The only exception to that in the Constitution in Article 1 is that Congress has the authority to at times control the time, place, and manner in which national elections take place, which only controls the House. At the time the Constitution was written, only controlled the House and the President of the United States. At the time the Constitution was written, senators were not part of the general election process. They were actually appointed by the states as representatives of the states on what we called at-will employment automatic recall, so that if the senators went to Washington, D.C., and didn't represent the states consistent with the state's desires and values, the state legislators could immediately fire the senators and replace them with someone who they believed would do the job properly. So until the ratification of the 17th Amendment, national elections were only the House of Representatives and the President of the United States. And so the only time the federal government can have anything to do with the election process is to the time, place, and manner in which the election of the House and now the Senate and the President take place. So the majority of our elections happen at the state and local level, and therefore the states maintain power and control over those.
So then, how come the president can specify things? And I know the answer. It's because the states have given up power to the federal government by accepting grants. So, for example, the National Voter Registration Act, 1993, the federal said, we'll give you money if you'll keep a centralized voter rolls, and you have to comply. By the way, this is my little cicada friend. We're having a cicada swarm today. So the states started taking grant money, and now they're beholden to the federal government because the government says, well, if you don't do this and you don't do this and you don't do this, we're not going to give you the money. So it's like an underhanded way to get back that control or to centralize that control. And then when HAVA came out, Help America Vote Act 2002, there we go again. The states are now receiving money from the federal government, and that's kind of reintroduced the federal government into the times, places, and manner because the states have agreed by accepting the money. Now it's a convoluted mess. Do you see where I'm going? If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, but that's the way I'm seeing it right now.
Well, it's definitely a huge contributor. It's really kind of a little bit deeper, more involved, but it's always usually about follow the money. And you also have a very strong misunderstanding, especially post the 14th, 15th, and 19th Amendments, as to who controls elections. So our education system has gone about teaching people, number one, that we are a democracy and that the federal government controls everything. And so you have a situation post 14th Amendment in an intentional transfer of power from the state to the federal government, both intentionally and collaterally. And through the education process post 14th Amendment, you also have this educational directive that I call federal supremacy being taught in all the public schools, so deep into the levels that we don't even actually teach the text of the Constitution properly anymore. I mean, if you ask the majority of Americans about the Supremacy Clause, the ones who have actually heard of it before will tell you that the Supremacy Clause states that the federal government and federal laws are superior to state laws and state constitution whenever they conflict. Well, the Supremacy Clause is Article 6, Clause 2, and it says nothing of the sort. And that's actually what is taught in law schools. I've seen case law trying to actually quote that that's what the Supremacy Clause mean, and the Supreme Court hasn't oftentimes endorsed versions very close to that as well. So the educational transformation and theft of state power into the hands of the federal government is really where the frog gets into the pot. And from there, over the decades of miseducation and misapplication of our Constitution, what we have is a situation where there you go, the water just keeps heating up and the American people become fundamentally ignorant. Now, we have a president that's a populist president, and I just want to say this because we are such a politically polarized people. I am a constitutionalist. I am neither a Republican nor a Democrat. I am not a political faction ideologist. I am more Washingtonian. I believe George Washington was entirely correct when he said in his farewell address of 1796 that political factions were a baneful foe of liberty and would be the destruction of the liberty of America. Which, by the way, if I remember, it is a point on how we've gotten to where we are with federal elections dealing everything. Yep. And so what we have is a very ignorant populace on what is the proper role of the President of the United States, what is the proper role of Congress, what is the proper role of the judiciary. And this is not a comment that's an anti-Trump comment, because this is a comment against that applies to every single president, probably, well, scattered along the way, beginning with John Adams. So you have a situation where presidents are held to be the leaders of America. Presidents are held to have enormous power that they don't have. I even listened to back in the day when Obama was president, there was a Fox News interview where Megyn Kelly was still on Fox News, and she was interviewing their constitutional expert, their chosen constitutional expert on Fox News, about Obama and the power of the president. And their constitutional expert, chosen by Fox News, says to Megyn Kelly, well, what are we going to do? Our founders created a constitution that gave the president of the United States enormous powers to do great things. And Megyn Kelly didn't correct him. She said, yeah, you're right. Those are those moments when I'm watching and I'm going, why am I watching Fox News still? And my head is exploding. But the reality is that media and conservative outlet media gets away with saying those things because that's what the majority of Americans have been taught to believe. Then I would say the final nail in the coffin, the corruption in and of itself is a symptom, not really the problem. The problem is the ignorance of the people, is that most Americans, and I was really shocked when I came to this conclusion as well, most Americans think that the Republican and Democrat parties are part of government. They don't realize that the Republican and Democrat parties are actually private corporate clubs. That's their classification legally, private corporate clubs. And part of the thing that distorts our understanding is how taxpayers pay for primary elections. Taxpayers should not be paying for primary elections. Primary elections are not civic functions. Primary elections are where private corporate clubs choose who will represent them in the general election, which is the civic function. So if you were to tell the American people that they were going to have to go now and fund the election for, I don't know, CEO of the Coca-Cola Corporation, or to make something a little bit more contemporarily hot topic, the American people are going to have to pay for the election of the CEO of Elon Musk's corporation. Would the American people be like, yes, let's fund the election for these corporate CEOs? They'd be like, what? No? Are you kidding me? People would be outraged. Yet every 4 years, we have elections. Every 4 years, we have primary elections so that the private corporations can choose who their representative for CEO of the corporation will be in the general election. So what we have is not one thing that's gone wrong. What we have are layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of miseducation, misapplication, and distortion that leads to the opportunity for election corruption. There's always been election corruption. There's always been election fraud since the beginning of time, and people were putting shells in boxes. But we create opportunities for them by not knowing how the system is supposed to work.
Let me put insert a comment there. A beautiful illustration of the point you're teaching us is in Colorado this last year. For the 2024 election, Colorado said, we're not going to put Trump on the primary ballot. We're not even going to put him in. And so the party, because you're right, the party is separate from the government. The party said, well, fine, we're just going to not have a primary election then. We're going to do a caucus and we're going to present our own candidate, because the parties actually have the power to run their own primaries. But just like the people are lazy, the parties are lazy. Oh, the government's going to pay for it and the government's going to do it. We'll let them do it. Well, that's the party falling on its face, and the party falls on its face in a lot of other ways too. But anyway, I just wanted to amplify that point because I think you're right on target.
Yeah, I mean, who could blame the parties? If the federal government was going to pay your mortgage for the rest of your life, and you didn't have any strings attached to that, I mean, for real, why wouldn't you? And the interesting paradox here, or contradiction, is not only does the government pay for the parties to have their elections, it's not a string that's attached to the parties. It's a string that's attached to the parties of the government, which means now political parties control government. You have now party majorities in the state and local and national levels that dictate what bills actually get heard, who gets representation in their legislative process. And the Speaker of the House has so much power. They're really the leader of the party in that branch of government, has so much power that they can completely disenfranchise entire voting segments of states by not allowing their voice to be heard through legislation.
Well done. If people ask questions about that later, we can come back to that. I have a related question. If we can prove that, and we can, and I have multiple places. Well, let me back away. Let me give you a hypothetical that's not so hypothetical.
Okay. I'm a lawyer.
Oregon,
I don't usually enjoy hypotheticals, but let's go for it.
Okay. I appreciate that. I'm gonna be good to you, I promise. Oregon right now is being sued by Judicial Watch for being out of compliance with federal law. Their voter rolls are out of compliance with federal law, and they've taken the HVA money, they've taken the NVRA money, and they're out of compliance. And so they violated their contract with the federal government. You know, we agree to run our rolls in a certain way and to run our elections in a certain way, and we accept this money in return. So that's the deal, right? Help America Vote Act 2002 and NVRA, National Voter Registration Act. People call it motor voter. So Judicial Watch is suing them, and they've been winning these lawsuits all over the country, and they're going to win again. I have a group of counties right now in Oregon, hypothetically, that when that happens, they're going to say, the state of Oregon's elections are out of compliance with federal law. So we don't have to comply with the laws of the state because they're out of compliance with federal law. We're going to comply with federal law instead. Now, that's a little gray here because the states are supposed to be running the elections, but the states are out of compliance with federal law. And one of the ways in which they're out of compliance is that their votes are being stolen from them through fraud. And we can prove that. And also another way their votes, their constitutional rights are being disenfranchised from them, are that Oregon is putting non-citizens in the rolls and giving them ballots and letting them vote. So in other words, this should empower counties, for example, to stand up and say, we're not going to use the state system anymore. We're going to comply with the federal law. What do you think about that hypothetical? Because it's not really hypothetical and it's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to give you the answer you like. I think it's a very dangerous move. There's a very specific reason why our founders did not want federal government and federal law running our elections. And I have to wonder, and I've seen this happen way too many times, it's the sort of Hegelian dialectic. Did they create the crisis to create the solution that everybody runs to the federal government to fix the elections, to undo the protections that were incorporated in our federalist style government, what we call a compound republic? That's the technical name for it. They gave us a compound republic to protect us from federal rule and federal control. And so are these crises between the state and federal level being created so that the people will run to the federal government to fix the problem, and the federal government wringing their hands going, oh, why would you ask us? Why would you ask us? Okay, we will. Great. Well, if you insist, and then you will have no more free elections ever again.
Right.
I mean, and not only will you no longer have a free election, you will no longer have a grassroots way to fix the problem of not having a free election. The only thing that keeps us having hope that we can fix an election is that the elections are to be based at the state and local level where the people have the most power. So it's a very dangerous thing in any way, shape, or form to expand federal power and look to the federal government to be the fixer of the problems they're creating.
So let me clarify. I wasn't saying that the counties are going to say, come and save us, federal government. I was saying that the counties were saying to the state government, pound sand, we're not using your stupid system anymore because it's disenfranchising us from our constitutional rights. It's disenfranchising us from our civil rights because our votes are being nullified by fraudulent ballots.
Yes, I understand that, but the follow-up statement, we are going to follow federal law, is the dangerous step.
Okay,
right?
Gotcha.
That's the dangerous step. The non-compliance is the right step. The step, then the next step to going, we're going to go federal law as our guide is now the misstep.
Gotcha.
So non-compliance is in the right way, where the county should be, okay, we are going to follow our state constitution now, regardless of what you're telling us to do. We are going to follow the state constitution, which already outlines how elections, every state constitution outlines how elections are supposed to take place. So we are going to follow the state constitution, and we are going to follow the uniform rule of naturalization at the federal level when it comes to citizenship. And by following the state constitution and following the U.S. Constitution's uniform rule of naturalization, we are going to run our own elections. That's how it should be worded. And it's not semantics. It's a really big deal.
Yeah, you're very good about semantics. I've been learning. You've been telling me over and over again, stop saying constitutional rights. You need to say God-given natural rights enumerated in the Constitution. She makes me say that every time I'm around. I
let you pass this time around, though.
But I forgive me. Just so we don't gloss over that. KrisAnne is dead on with this. You're not supposed to say that there are constitutional rights because that implies you get your rights from the Constitution, which you don't. There are God-given natural rights that are enumerated in the Constitution. Did I say that right, KrisAnne? Okay, good. So she gave me a pass this time for the sake of being nice on the program, but which I appreciate. So where I'm going is this gets convoluted now. There's a little grayness in there that you could help us out with, because if my civil rights are being violated because my vote was nullified, that's a federal issue, yes?
No.
That's still a state issue?
Yes. Because Article 3 establishes that disputes between a citizen and their own state are not subject to federal judicial jurisdiction. And state voter qualification and state elections are a state issue. Where it becomes convoluted is the misapplication of the 14th Amendment and how that has been used to expand federal power when it comes to what we call civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
That was not the intent of the 14th Amendment in any way, shape, or form. However, because we have been pushing educational-wise, and I mean, we don't have the time on this show for me to walk you through the whole timeline of that. I've done a very, very detailed study. I actually teach an entire class that's 8 weeks long at River University here in Tampa on the dilution of state sovereignty to federal supremacy and how that has happened post-Reconstruction and actually began at the tariff conflict in from 1828 to 1830. And so, not to like opening this wonky can of worms, but the reality is election disputes, constitutionally speaking, and I realize we are in oftentimes a very post-constitutional society, and people are going to be shaking their heads at me, and lawyers going to be like, no, she's not. I'm like, look, we don't even teach it properly in law school. So, I'm absolutely constitutionally correct, but the way we're operating and the way we continue to operate is post-constitutional, unconstitutional. So constitutionally speaking, voter issues should be a matter of state judiciary.
We agree. But if the state isn't guaranteeing the republic form of government, then the federal government has a right to intervene, yay or nay?
No, they don't, unless they're being violently invaded. That's what Article 4, Section 4 is talking about. It's talking about violent invasion. It's talking about violent domestic dispute. Okay, that's not the same thing. So if there is an internal dispute in the state, and this is a very sensitive topic that it takes a minute to really understand, and I think that maybe we have been so federal centralized that we lose track of the danger of being federal centralized. We've been sort of, our conscience has been seared on this issue. So the idea that if the state is not following their own constitution, the federal government has to come in on their horse and save the day. What you're really saying is that the federal government is superior to the state governments, right, and their colonies in subjection to the federal government, subject to their rule and reign. And anytime the federal government doesn't agree with how a state is running their business, then they can bring the troops in and fix that. And now you don't have states anymore that are sovereign, right, you have colonies. And so the proper course, now people then are like, well, KrisAnne, what if the state government's turned against the people? Well, that's why the people have the most power at the state and local level. You're supposed to rise up at the state and local level and take back control of your government. And here's the sad truth. It's really, really sad. The only reason why we have reached the point where we have local and state governments in collusion of corruption is, I just have to speak plainly because that's who I am, is because the people have been sleeping at the wheel for over 150 years.
Wow.
And we've allowed politics to drive us into a ditch instead of being the government. You see, we've been trained into the mentality to look for leaders instead of being them. We have been trained into the mentality of looking for political saviors instead of being the government that we're supposed to be. That's what a constitutional republic means. That's what we the people means. We the people is not a democratic collective in a socialist experiment. We the people means that as every state constitution says. I've studied all the state constitutions. I've even studied the constitutions of 36 international countries. Every state constitution says all political power is derived from the people. And that's what we have surrendered.
We the people.
Yeah, and the movement.
Which is what this is about.
Yeah. And the problem is now, in the modern context of our education and everything that has happened, we've allowed that phrase, we the people, to become synonymous with the federal government. We don't realize we the people is us And the federal government is the creation of the states, and the states are our creation. Therefore, we're the creation of all government. So we have to be a people that takes back their power. And that's what the movie Non-Compliant is about.
So after I saw that, I came up with this motto that I've been using all over the country, where I'm basically saying to people that they have to take back their elections. They've given them away.
Right.
Instead of being the government and running their own elections, they think that them government runs the elections. And no, you're the government. Start acting like it. If you don't like the way the election's running, run it your own way. And if you have a beef with the state, have a beef with the state. But it's your election. It's your voice. You're the sovereign duty. You're the start acting like it. People are you're absolutely right. But you used a longer number than I did, unfortunately. I usually say that it's at least 2 or 3 generations, but you're saying it's 150 years that we've just relinquished. We've been steadily, incrementally relinquishing the idea that we, the people, are the government.
Yeah, it's actually more than 150 years because it began between 1828 and 1830. That was that's where the existential crisis began that caused the people that I call federal supremacists really ramp up their focus and their goal to turn us into a stronger centralized government. I mean, most Americans believe that our current Constitution was created, and even when you Google it or you look in textbooks, even Christian textbooks will say, you know, we left behind the Articles of Confederation because it created a central government that was too weak, and we created this new Constitution to create a more powerful, more defined central government. Well, that's an absolute lie. It's the exact opposite that happened. The Articles of Confederation failed because they were too broad and they didn't define the federal government's power and the state's power enough. So we had governments running around doing things they weren't allowed to do, big government style, and people refusing to comply. It was really political chaos because there was not enough definition. So the current Constitution was not an expansion of federal power. It was a defining of federal power. And even James Madison says in Federalist 45 that the powers delegated to the federal government are few and defined. Not just a few, not just defined, but few and defined. We didn't make a more powerful central government. We created a more defined central government, which actually limited their power greater than the Articles of Confederation did.
So the thing I love about the way you think and argue is that you're dead on point. You're correct. Let's waffle for a minute. Forgive me. So what you just described is what's supposed to happen in theory.
Right. No, in legal reality, that's what's supposed to happen.
Yes. But what is happening isn't that, because there's corruption and ignorance. We, the people, are stupid because we don't teach the Constitution. And really, I hate even saying that. When people say we don't teach the Constitution anymore, I say it's your responsibility to learn the Constitution. If you're waiting for somebody to teach it to you, you're the problem. Learn it. If you need to know it, learn it. I mean, it's my responsibility to be a citizen because America is an experiment self-government. I'm supposed to learn it.
Let me interject for just 1 second. I actually have constitutional training at libertyfirstsociety.com. We have online classes that you take at your own pace, and we're doing something really special this summer. This summer at libertyfirstsociety.com, we're doing a program I call the Constitutional Deep Dive, Truth, Liberty, and Original Intent. And beginning in the 3rd week of June, if you go to libertyfirstsociety.com and you sign up, beginning the 3rd week of June, we're going to do this deep dive into the Constitution, where I'm going to do 2 30-minute classes a week, and we're going to go from the beginning, which is the genealogy of the Constitution, all the way through the Constitution to the amendments. So if you come with us, I'm going to try to make sure it's stretched. I'm going to try to get it done in 20 weeks with 2 30-minute classes a week. You can sign up now so that you're in the system and ready to go when we get it launched in the 3rd week of June. Along with those classes, 2 30-minute classes each week, we're going to have self-evaluating quizzes available to you to make sure that you're really catching what we're doing. And this constitutional deep dive, just like everything else I teach, I love that saying, the hay down where the cows can reach it is pretty amazing. But what I like to tell people is it's simple enough for a 6th grader, but deep enough that even the scholars learn. Because I've taught Supreme Court justices at the state level. I've taught, for the last 15 years, I've taught people with PhDs in political science and American history, and they've all come and told me, after the genealogy class, by the way, I learned more about the Constitution today in an hour than I have in my entire education. So this is not just your 5-minute fun fact video about the Constitution or some wonky university professor sounding like he's from Ferris Bueller's Day Off trying to teach you on the Constitution while you're nodding off. We bring it down and make it fun and make it reasonable, make it understandable, and make it's something that you really enjoy doing. And so I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but there are avenues to learn, and we do have an obligation to learn.
I'm as I travel the country, I'm almost on the road pretty much constantly, and I've been in 48 states and given almost 1,000 presentations now. And what I'm seeing happening around the country is I'm seeing a renewed interest in the Constitution. There are political Constitution classes all over the place. Karen can tell you all about it. And so, and in fact, she's in this movement because she was learning and teaching the Constitution. Okay. And I'm seeing a political revival across the country happening. So it's a good time for you to offer that class. I bet you we get you some more attendees, I hope. And then, but I'm also seeing a spiritual revival. And I'm seeing this because I think people are waking up to the fact that our political system is not working the way it's supposed to. It's corrupt. And that and so people are saying, well, wait a minute, doesn't the Constitution say X, Y, Z? And yeah, KrisAnne says, yeah, it does say that. Well, then how come we're doing this, A, B, and C? And so, well, then how do we fix it? And then that's where this whole idea of grassroots comes in, and this whole idea of non-compliance. We, the people, have the power, and if the government is not behaving constitutionally, we, the people, have to say, we're not going to comply, and we have an obligation to not comply. How am I doing? Am I on track?
Yeah, you said the statement, we don't follow the Constitution. I wrote it down because it really sort of clicked to me. You said we don't follow the Constitution. People say we don't follow the Constitution now because of the corruption and the ignorance. I say that's not correct. Because we don't follow the Constitution, there's ignorance and corruption.
Fair enough.
It's really the other way around.
Fair enough.
And the solution is not to maintain the status quo by going along to get along. The solution is you have to start following the law to the supreme law of the land in order to restore it. All these magic pills and all of the, I often look at the uprising of social media influencers, right? They're everywhere, and everybody's got their magic pill.
Yeah.
The problem is that people by nature want the easy route, so they're always looking for the magic pill and the incantation and the silver bullet. There you are. The reality is, it's taken us since 1830 to get where we are. It won't take us that long to get back, but it will take work. Thomas Paine said, "What we achieve too easily, we esteem too lightly, and dearness alone gives everything its value." And heaven has placed an enormous value on its gift of freedom. So it's going to be taken, it's going to take efforts. And I am also encouraged. I mean, I've been on the road now for over 15 years. Before COVID, I did 260 meetings a year for 7 years straight.
Wow.
We met and spoke all over the country. I've actually had the opportunity to teach in all 50 states. I've had the opportunity to teach in Liberty in 5 countries. So I'm encouraged as well by the movement. We actually started seeing the turn before COVID, but then COVID came and it really accelerated everything.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
people looked around and said, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. I got to figure out what's actually right.
Right.
So we are on the right track, but we've got to get people educated, organized, and activated. In that order.
Sounds like what I'm trying to do.
Absolutely.
I say they got to wake up first. Once they're awake, then you got to educate them and get them out. You got to give them something to do, and you got to bring the hay down where the cows can eat. That's what I tried to do. That was excellent. So we're in the last few minutes here. What's your prognosis? How are things looking from your perspective? You've been awake longer than me. I've been awake since COVID in 2020. Woke me up when I caught the government lying to me about what was going on, and we got the health director of Ohio fired in the process. Where are you at? Where's your head?
Alexander Hamilton said, experience is the oracle of truth, and where its responses are unequivocal, they ought to be held to be sacred and conclusive. So my opinion, I'm always very careful not to offer my opinion, because my opinion is not what ought to be relevant to guiding our focus and our hope. It's experience. And I have actually studied centuries of history. And I can tell you, and if you've watched the genealogy of the Constitution class, which is also available at libertyfirstsociety.com in greater depth than what the YouTube video gives. So that's just a small portion of the genealogy of the Constitution. And so if you watch the genealogy of the Constitution, what you find out is an oracle of truth. That when people stand for liberty, they never lose. Point number 1. When you stand for liberty, you never lose. Point number 2. When you stand for liberty with persistence, you always end up ahead. And what I mean by ahead is you get smaller government and greater liberty, because there's a direct correlation. More government, less liberty; more liberty, less government. And every time people stand for liberty, not freedom like the French Revolution, that was a completely different thing, but we stand for liberty as the foundation of America, then you understand that in history, we've never lost. And as I point out, people say, well, okay, well, what does that look like? How does that work? Well, in the non-compliant movie, we show you how Harvard has actually done a study of centuries of non-compliance. And a study of centuries of non-compliance has proven, remember, his experience is the oracle of truth, that peaceful non-compliance at the threshold of 3% of a society. So all you need is 3% of your society. That's 3% of your neighborhood, 3% of your county, 3% of your city, 3% of your state, 3% of the states. So Harvard says, after studying centuries of history, peaceful noncompliance at the threshold of 3% of a population has never, ever failed to make a lasting change. Now, violent noncompliance is always an issue as well, but violent noncompliance and violent coups and violent revolutions have failed. But peaceful noncompliance has never failed.
Because of this work, I have been reading several books on revolution. And I have found the same principle to be true. Here's a guy who Blueprint for Revolution. And I like these books like Rules for Radicals. I like these books because they talk about revolution and societal change in an objective 30,000 foot view. They're not picking a religious point of view or a political point of view. They're saying this is what happens when you have a nonviolent revolution, and this is how to organize it, and this is what you need to do. And it's fascinating because it's just exactly like General Flynn says, local power has the national influence. Everything is local. Everything is local. People are always looking to somebody else to fix it, though. So all we have to do is educate people and activate them locally. And you're saying all we need is 3%. I think that's what this one said too. If you can get 3% of the people awake and moving in the right direction, then we win.
And
we
you
make
just
lasting change.
You always start at the levels closest to you. That's why the school board movement has been so successful.
Yeah.
Start at the bottom up, because we the people, and all political powers derive from the people. And so you have to start from the bottom up and just grow out this way. And that's how it works.
Yeah.
But you can't look for a savior. You can't
Right.
look for a leader. You have to be one. And if we don't train up our children in this, no matter what we accomplish, Dr. Frank, our children in the indoctrination centers,
Yes.
we call government education,
Yeah.
will be taught socialism and Marxism and Gramsciism, which is, Marxism is actually violent socialism. Gramsciism is peaceful, gradual socialism, which is why it's so successful.
Yeah.
Our children will turn us right back to the direction we're trying to escape from. So really, our focus has to be simultaneously on making sure that we are educating our children for the future of America, for the future of liberty. It's got to be bigger than America too. I mean, I love patriotism. I'm a veteran. I love America. But if we don't start understanding it's bigger than America, it's God's gift of liberty that we're trying to secure, then we'll be short-sighted and shallow, and we'll get what we call in the grassroots movements the Trump slump, because the savior has arrived and now we don't have to do anything.
Trust me, we're in it.
Oh, I know. It happened the last time too.
Yeah.
I mean, that was before your awakening, but we went through that too. So
yeah, everybody says, okay, we got Trump elected, so now we can all go to sleep. But Trump understood. And when he was inaugurated, he even said, we're returning power back to you, the people. That's what he said. But we all went golfing and fishing, and we never picked up the baton. The 3% never said, yeah, we're in. And so that was a disaster. And so I'm telling everybody now, it's great. I mean, it's fun to watch the news to see what's happening right now, because it's fun to see the tumult. But if you're waiting for Washington to save the day, we're in trouble. I've been telling everybody we're in a war, and it's like Trump is bombing Berlin. We have to occupy Normandy. If we don't occupy, we're done. Everything that's being done right now is reversible. So in the end, the people have to be awake and engaged. I love your 3%. And I know you wanted to leave at 9, so I'm trying to be respectful of that. Is there any concluding comments you want to make? And then I'll see if I can field questions, or maybe if you want to hang around, you can take questions too. Go ahead. Any final?
Yes, it's important to stick to principles. That's why we're liberty over security, principle over party, and truth over personality. That's been my motto for over 15 years. That has made me a champion in some sectors and a pariah in others, and all within the conservative family. But you have to stand on principle. So just encourage everybody to get educated. There's always something more that you can learn. I mean, as much as I have learned and as much as I've poured into it, I am still learning. And if you ever meet anybody that thinks that they've learned everything they can learn, then you need to disassociate yourself with them, because they are an idiot. So learning is very important. That's why we have Liberty First Society. That's why I really believe that I was inspired to do the constitutional deep dive to help people know what's really important from a sort of 30,000 foot view. My goal and my desire is to be an educator. That's who I am in my spirit, and I love doing it. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to do this. I would love to stay. I have team here that helps me. I have to respect their time
Of course.
as much as my time. So, but I do thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I'm grateful, and maybe we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you keeping me between the bumpers.
My pleasure.
KrisAnne, thank you so much for your time and for your
Thank
team's
you.
time. We're so appreciative.
Yeah, I'm on X and Instagram too, by the way. So
I was
anybody on
just going to
X and
ask you
Instagram.
how people can follow you. So perfect.
Yeah, so I'm on X, and X is I just post. I don't pay any attention. I'm at
Right.
Real KA Hall. That's me at Real KA Hall. There are fake accounts that are me.
I know, me too.
That are not me, rather, that take my name and my picture and all of that. But the one that's Real KA Hall, no lines, no underscores, no numbers, no nothing, at Real KA Hall. And then on Instagram, I'm cheating by looking at my phone. I am at KrisAnne.Hall. There are also fake accounts for me on Instagram. So at KrisAnne.Hall. That's me.
Thank you,
And I
KrisAnne.
just did a post, just so you can find me. On both platforms, my most recent post has to do with the Supreme Court's decision in County Infrastructure Coalition versus Eagle County.
You also, I noticed, put up a post talking about what happens if you get TSA.
Yes, that one's kind of gone viral, so that one's pretty exciting. What happened, what you've surrendered by signing up for TSA, TCMI, and TCWI and Global Pre-Check.
Yeah. That's a hot topic, which I know we don't have time to get it because you got to go, but we
Yeah.
love you and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. God bless everybody.
God bless. Thank you. All right. Well, Dr. Frank,
You can see why I'm such a huge fan of that
she's
lady.
amazing. She's absolutely amazing. There are some questions in the chat. You want to try and
I
field a
can
couple
try.
of those?
But really, and you can see she wipes the floor with me if I get out of line. So I'll do my
incredible.
best. I'll do my best if it's a constitutional question, but if it's in my field of expertise, physics and chemistry or math or elections, then I'm in.
Well, let's see. Let's go to the first one. So the first one, somebody did ask, and she did address this, if any of her classes are online. So you guys can go to that www.libertyfirstsociety.com, and all of her stuff is on there. And it sounds like these classes that she's going to be hosting are pretty exciting. I'm probably going to sign up for those. So
I can't be around that lady and not learn. So
it's incredible.
Yeah, she's very valuable.
Okay, you know this lady very well, Samantha Frost.
From Oregon.
Yes, and she said, what if we, the people, have requested federal help from our Invasion of Corruption, Title 10, Section, it looks like 253 and 254. And I think she's trying to figure out, what do we do? Because Oregon, they've got some issues.
Right, yeah. And I posed that hypothetical to KrisAnne on purpose because I know this is about to happen. And KrisAnne is dead on right. We can't defeat we don't want to defeat the federal aspect of our country. We don't want the federal government to come in and defeat our state governments. I agree with that. But in practice, let me give it a simple example. So a couple months ago, we were at CPAC, remember, and that day we were there, the president spoke at a governor's conference, right? So we have executive, federal versus the states, the governor executives. And President Trump had just signed that executive order where he said you can't have men in women's sports. Okay. Well, in Maine, the governor, she stood up and says, we're going to continue to have men in our women's sports in our state. And President Trump just said, well, that's okay. You can keep doing that. Somebody hand me the list of all the federal grants we have going there. Okay.
Right.
And so, in other words, he's using what's happened is, like KrisAnne says, it's a money thing. So all this money is flowing from the federal government into the states, contingent upon behavior by the states. And so Trump can just, and you notice he does something interesting, like with Harvard. He didn't cut off their funding. He put a pause on it. Okay. It's a very strategic thing. What's happened is the states have become addicted to that money. And so it's become a controlling influence. I mean, there's a reason, like, for example, Hillsdale College refuses to take any federal grants. None of their students can have federal loans. Why? They want no strings attached, and they don't want any influence. Well, the states have already accepted the money. The states have already, and they've traded away some of their state sovereignty by taking that money. So that's the situation we're in. And that's why Judicial Watch can sue Oregon. I'm getting back to Oregon here. That's why Judicial Watch can sue Oregon and say, you're out of compliance with NVRA and HAVA. You're taking this money, federal monies, and you're not in compliance. But they're also in violation of other laws. So the whole mess is created there. And that is what I'm trying to empower the grassroots there to take advantage of that moment, take advantage of this opportunity where it's proven in court. So we're not just a bunch of conspiracy wackadoodles. Right. It's actually proven in court that the state is out of compliance with federal law regarding elections. And so the state is breaking its own laws, and the state is breaking federal laws. So and KrisAnne was right to correct me, but they're also in violation of their own state laws. And so that now the citizens can rise up and say, we're not going to comply, and we don't have to comply. In fact, we have an obligation to not comply. And so anyway, that I think I answered Samantha's question kind of directly and indirectly at the same time.
Yes. And the one thing I love that KrisAnne talks about, and honestly, this is the reason that I even got involved in election integrity in the first place, is it's not just about us now, right? It's making sure that our next generation gets educated as well. Because if we're not educating them on what their God-given rights are, right? Not constitutional rights, their God-given rights are, then this is just going to happen over and over and over. And the whole point, right, of us getting involved, right, getting activated, everybody actually focusing on fixing things, is so that the next generation has the opportunity to live in a free country and make sure that they don't end up in, an oligarchy or communism or, even worse, right? And so I saw somebody had mentioned about getting her stuff into public schools, which I totally agree. I'm not opposed. But honestly, I say pull your kids out of public school. This is what I did. Pull your kids out of public school, homeschool them. I know it's not always convenient, but guess what? That's going to make sure that our children in the next generation are educated and know what their God-given rights are. So I love how she talks about that.
Let me make one nuance. I love everything you said, by the way. I'm not disagreeing with anything you said.
No,
I want to make one nuance, though. There are God-given natural rights that are enumerated in the Constitution. Those are some of our rights. There are also constitutional rights that are not God-given. Right. God didn't give us the right to vote, okay?
Right.
That's a constitutional thing, okay? And then, so there's our God-given rights, there's our federal rights, and there are also state rights. Right. And what I've been encouraging people to do is to read their own state constitution. People are 100%. Shocked to discover that their own state constitutions aren't what they think. Read the preamble to Nebraska's state constitution. It'll blow your mind. You know how we have the Second Amendment that allows you, to keep and bear arms? It actually spells it out. It says people can carry them for hunting, people can carry them for self-defense, people can carry them for fun. I mean, it's like it's right in their constitution. And so it's fun to read. Now, going back to elections, in California, most states say that the people have a right to vote in the election. But in California, it says they have a right to have their ballot counted. It's different. They have a constitutional right for their ballot to be counted. And if their ballot isn't being counted, and we can prove that it's not being counted because there's something wrong with the election, then they're in violation of their state constitutional rights. But those are constitutional rights. I always like to mention, and then I'll shut up and let you ask another question. I always like to mention at this point that, God's form of government is not a republic. God's form of government is a benevolent dictatorship where he's the king. But here we are on earth, and we've decided that our best way to preserve our liberty, at least our founding fathers thought, was to have a constitutional representative form of government. But we're really losing it, and we're losing it fast. We need to fight now. Listen to this.
Freedom is a fragile thing, and it's never more than one generation away from extinction. It is not ours by way of inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation, for it comes only once to a people. And those in world history who have known freedom and then lost it have never known it again.
Isn't that awesome?
I love that you posted that, because I actually used that exact same speech for Memorial Day on my Twitter. I love it. It is so amazing.
Most people don't know what that speech is from. That's from his gubernatorial inauguration speech in the 1960s. I was a kid in California and heard that when he was governor. But the thing that's so amazing about that is he was telling us freedom, every generation has to earn, has to win, has to secure the freedom for the next generation. And if it ever happens that you lose it, you never get it back. And what's scary to me is it has not been like a single day revolution where the enemy's coming away and taking away our liberty. It's been steadily, gradually, incrementally, frog in the pot. We're just gradually relinquishing it. And I would never have believed it. I had 2 German postdocs work with me when I was back in academics in the early 90s. And we were walking across the street one day, and I just said, "Hey, so what do you think of America? You guys had just come from Germany." This is after the wall, remember? I said, "So what do you think of America so far?" They said, "We love America. You guys have amazing economy. You have so much stuff in the grocery stores. We're confused about one thing. You guys have freedom, and you are so willing to give it up." We are so spoiled, we don't even recognize the liberty we have, and so we've just been gradually, incrementally letting it go away. And I heard those words from those people from another country telling me that in the early 90s, and I still remained asleep for the following decades. And it wasn't until COVID when I watched half of our country roll over and just give up to the government that I realized we're in horrible shape. We're way worse shape than I ever dreamed. So we have to fight it. We have to do it now. And if we're looking for Trump to save us, folks, that ain't going to do it. It's great to have him up there. I love the guy. He's doing great stuff. But I'm telling you, he's bombing Berlin. We have to occupy Normandy, and it's now or never. Okay, I'll shut up and let you go to the next question. I'll get off my pulpit here.
No, I love, though, what you said is people need to read their state constitutions. One of the things that I actually did is I subscribe to alerts from our legislature now. So anytime that either my House rep or my senator issues a co-sponsored bill or something goes through their committee, I get notified of it. And, I think it's great because it really gets me to know who is representing me. And I tell people all the time, the one thing that I think is so important is your House rep, your senator, whoever is representing you on a state and even federal level, they should know your name, because they can't represent you, right, if they don't know how you feel. So they should know your name. You need to have a good conversation with them, keep in contact with them, because if they represent you, right, they're supposed to represent you, then you need to make your voice heard and hold them accountable.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness. And now we are going to fulfill that mission together.
Right.
The reason I had that one queued up is because I don't think it's merely a political revival we're experiencing. It's also a spiritual revival. And we have to recognize that the reason that we're corrupt, the reason we have child sex trafficking, the reason we have drug problems is because we need a spiritual revival as well. I had that one ready. I just, and what one of the, I love what Trump says here. He says we have to fulfill that mission together.
Right.
I think Trump has always recognized, even though he's the leader of this MAGA movement, that's like an awakening movement, he's always recognized that it's us, and it has to be us. And so he's a good leader, and he's trying to get people to wake up and to engage. But I think we, the people, are pretty asleep still, but that's all right. Anyway, you want to do another question?
Sure, we'll go to, looks like we're winding down, so we'll go to
Good.
this one. Marty asks, how does all this relate to Tina Peters upholding federal law and her retaining federal election records?
Tina Peters didn't only uphold federal law. Tina Peters also followed, I've seen the letter with my own eyes. In fact, I touched it with my own hands. Tina Peters got a letter from the Secretary of State, Griswold, in Colorado, instructing her and all the other clerks, they all got the same letter, telling them to back up their systems. Okay. Now, when I sat in her office with her in April of 2021, she said, Dr. Frank, I don't know how to back up my systems. None of the clerks do. We don't know how to do this. We've never done it before, even though it's federal law. So let me wrap that up, then let me answer the real question there. So she got backups, and we helped her get backups. And that's why Mr. Lindell got entangled, because I connected that, and I arranged for her backups, her forensic backups, to be taken. And, that's why they ended up taking Mr. Lindell's cell phone, and why they took my cell phone, because we were making that happen, and that was all being investigated for that. So she did everything legally. But this is why I was teasing. I wasn't teasing. I was pulling at the strings a little bit, because KrisAnne is dead on right. She's never wrong. She's always on principle. She's always on task. But the frustrating thing for all of us in the real world is that the world is corrupt, and they're not following the law, and they're not following. And so Jenna Griswold and the state of Colorado conspired against Tina Peters and persecuted Tina Peters deliberately, because she was actually doing what she was supposed to be doing to preserve the integrity of the elections. So now, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, in fact, I've been in a lot of counties in your state, Karen, in Pennsylvania, where I've sat with clerks, and right to my face, they say, when you show them fraud, when you show them that their elections has problems, when you show them that their election doesn't reconcile, they look me right dead in the eye and they say, Dr. Frank, I'm not going to do anything because I don't want to be Tina Petered. So do you notice that, and that is what KrisAnne said. KrisAnne said the way we fix the problem is we follow the law. Well, guess what? Your clerks sold themselves out for their jobs. I actually have, there's one in particular in Missouri that just echoes in my mind to this day. I was with a local patriot, I don't want to use names, and we were sitting there with her, and she says, Dr. Frank, I've been doing this 28 years. I got 2 years to retirement. I know there's fraud in my election, but I ain't saying nothing because I want my retirement. So in other words, they know if they step out, they're going to be Tina Petered, and they're going to be consequences. And that's why it's so important to support a person like Mike, because he was willing to step out. He was willing to put it all on the line. And I love the guy. He's a true patriot. Sometimes he talks too much, but so do I. But he's willing to put his money where his mouth is. And when I met him in March of 2021, we were filming Scientific Proof and all that. He and I are having dinner, and he told me he was going to spend his $30 million cash he had in the bank on election integrity. And he went through that pretty quickly. And now he's $40 million personally in the hole. personally, and that doesn't include all the judgments against him that potentially for all the lawsuits. I mean, the lawsuit he's going into now is for billions, right? This is Dominion suing him, and they're suing him for, I think, 2.8 billion, some ridiculous number like this. So his financial well-being is worse than in the toilet. I mean, the guy is in horrible shape. So if you guys can please support him, please do. I do, and I put up those ways. In fact, I should put that up again real quick. The ways to help him.
Please do.
The ways to help him. These are the ways to help him. And I always joke about it, but it's the truth. If you buy stuff on My Pillow, use my promo code, Dr. Frank. I don't get any money, I promise. I've set it up that he gets all of the commission. You know, if you're watching like the War Room and you use the War Room code, or you use Seth Keshel, you use Seth. I love those guys. You can support them if you want. But if you use my code, Dr. Frank, all the money goes to Mike immediately into the Lindell Offense Fund. Now, Mike announced a new way, and that's the Give, Send, Go. And I don't know, I don't know whether he did it or somebody else set it up for him. But all those ways, I know for a fact, firsthand experience, he gets the money, all of the money. So if you want to help Mike, please do. So, but that sort of goes back to the Tina Peters thing. She's being persecuted for following the law.
Right.
Mike's being persecuted for following the law. So exactly what KrisAnne said is right. The way we fix the problem is following the law, but it doesn't come cheap. And, you know, and that's why this movie about non-compliant is it was very inspiring to me. I watched it early 2021. It just blew my mind. It's like, of course, this is exactly how we fix this. And I have an example for that. So remember when COVID was happening in 2020, we had a group of super moms in our state who were awake before me. And when the government said you had to wear masks, just a second. Hey, hon, you go to bed now? I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you, hon. Nellie's bedtime. When he said you had to wear masks to the grocery store, what these ladies did is they held shopping days. 40 of them would show up at the Walmart. They'd all walk in and they'd take their masks off. Go ahead, throw us out, manager. What manager is going to do that? The point is they did not comply. And we need more of that in our culture. There are a lot of people that got kicked out of their careers, got kicked out of their jobs because they refused to take the vaccine. The more we comply with the Constitution doesn't say you can jab me with something I don't want. The Constitution says I am sovereign over my body. Okay, so in other words, this is a big deal. We need to not comply. So you can see why this is connected to our elections. And you can see why I'm teaching people find fraud in your own election and then refuse to comply with the state system because it's disenfranchising you from your constitutional rights. You have to stand up. Oh, but we brought the evidence to the Secretary of State. Yeah, how's that working for you? Nothing's going to happen. The people have to wake up, but the people have to engage. And I have heard the 3% number before, and I think KrisAnne's right. Did you hear in Shasta County? Boy, oh boy, are we winning there. Okay, in Shasta County, we got Clint Curtis appointed as the new ROV. He's our fourth one. We finally got somebody in. It's awesome. And the community is so awake. I was just there last weekend. All I have to do is make a phone call and say, hey, I'm coming to town, and there'll be hundreds of people will turn out. And that's a small county, 75,000. That community is awake. The reason we're winning is not because Smarty Pants is coming to town. The reason we're winning is because the people are awake and engaged. That's the key.
Absolutely. I know that we are winding down. We are a little past 9:30 or 8:30 for those of you in Central Time. So I did want to just address this. Somebody had asked who the 5 Strong group was. They are an amazing conservative group out of Huntsville, Alabama. They helped Dr. Frank along with KrisAnne Hall and Cause of America set up the call today. Their website is 5stronghsv.com. If you're interested in getting involved with them, you can, put your name in the chat. Or you can go onto the Cause of America website and click on the Get Involved tab, put in your information, and we'll make sure we get that information over to the 5 Strong group as well. Because just like Dr. Frank said, we have strength in numbers. So the more people that can help fight for election integrity in Alabama and in any state, actually. You don't have to live in Alabama to get involved with Cause of America for us to connect you with people in your state. We have connections in almost every single state that we can get you guys involved, get you guys, in action, really working at the local level. Dr. Frank talks about it too. General Flynn, he says local action gets national results. So, like they talked about before, yes, it's awesome that we have Trump in place and he's going to work on the federal level, but he can't do everything, right? It's got to be us to work at the local level. So I implore you, and if you want to get in touch with Dr. Frank, look right there. That is his information. You can email him. He is amazing at responding, and I'm sure would be happy to come to your area if you'd like him to talk to a group of people. Isn't that right, Dr. Frank?
Yes, I always tell people, if you'll build a team, I will come. You build it, I will come. It's a dumb joke.
And I'm sorry we didn't get to every question tonight. If you guys would like the recording, you can email us at info@causeofamerica.org. And Suzanne, anything else that you ladies would like for tonight?
No, I think this was an excellent call.
Perfect.
An excellent call. And I really appreciate everything you're doing, Dr. Frank. And we're excited about you coming here in July.
I can't wait to get there. I haven't been to Alabama since I met with John Merrill. And I've met with him twice, and the guy's a loser.
He is.
So I've never worked with the grassroots in Alabama in a meaningful way yet. So this will be my first opportunity. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, thank you.
Hopefully we'll represent Alabama a little bit better than John Merrill.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank our speakers. I know KrisAnne already left, but Dr. Frank, thank you for taking the time tonight. All of you in Alabama who are continuing to work, tirelessly on election integrity, thank you guys, because Cause of America couldn't do what we do without people like you. So thank you so much. Thank everybody who joined the call tonight. We're so appreciative that you took the time out this evening, and I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Good night.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.